Welcome back. We're on our final leg of our discussion about operant theory. I'm going to talk a little bit about additional applications of operant theory, both in designing instructions and in modifying behaviors. We've talked some about modifying behaviors, and that's kind of a general kind of thing. How my husband might get me to do the dishes by having chocolate rewards and an intermittent schedule of reinforcement. But now we're going to talk about a much more systematic view of changing behaviors, typically done by school psychologists working with teachers in the schools or in a variety of settings, including therapy and at home. And the process that is involved, and this is not something you would do without the aid of a therapist, an applied behavioral analyst, is that target behaviors are identified. These are the behaviors that need to be changed. These behaviors are measured before intervention occurs at a baseline, and then they're measured during the intervention. Some sequence of antecedents and behaviors and consequences are observed and recorded. And then there's an analysis of patterns in the data and events, this functional analysis. And then a treatment plan is developed, or an intervention plan is developed. The implementation of this happens, and the behaviors are monitored. They monitor the behavioral plan to see how effective it is, and they can make modifications to this plan if needed. If it's successful, then there's helping students learning to generalize these behaviors to other situations. And when target behaviors are reached, treatment or intervention is phased out. In a school setting, again, the school psychologist would be doing this, not a teacher, but you would be working with the school psychologist in developing this and implementing the plan, very likely. This is an example of applied behavioral analysis intervention. And let me just take a look and share with you a little bit about the study. The goal in this study was to increase the times students with autism asked for help when they were unsure of an answer. Jane, Lisa, and Craig are observed for the number of times they seek assistance when they are not sure of an answer, and thus the percentage of correct answers they give is recorded. This is called the baseline. And you can see over here we're having low performance on Jane, Lisa, and Craig. Now you'll see that the interventions are staggered because if it's one person in a classroom, they will not be able to deal with multiple students at one time very easily. The intervention is to help them learn to ask for help. Lisa and Craig are still being observed, but the first intervention occurs with Jane. Once we see Jane's successful interventions, success of the interventions, then Lisa and then Craig. The dashed vertical line is when the intervention starts. Jane's started at about 17 questions right here. And this is when the intervention started for Lisa, and this is when the intervention started for Craig. After the intervention starts, behaviors continue to be observed, and the percentage of correct responses are still recorded. After each student's intervention, the percentage of correct responses increases overall. The probe, which is right here and here, is to check and make sure the intervention is working with someone outside the classroom. So this is just a very brief example of how ABA is used to help individuals make change. There are two effective ways to use ABA with groups. Group contingency plans, the entire class or group has to perform the target behavior, or token economies, where reinforcements are tokens that can be used to purchase other reinforcers. We do this a lot in the classroom, sometimes in a not very systematic way. But tokens are given immediately after the behaviors, and other reinforcers might be involved. Students get tokens during the week, and then on Friday they can go to the store or a treasure chest where they can exchange their tokens for other material reinforcers. There's another approach used as cognitive behavioral modification or cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. This is a very popular model in the therapeutic community. And let's talk a minute just about the effectiveness of ABA. ABA works pretty well in changing very specific behaviors in the school setting: study habits, social skills, hygiene. It's very useful for students with special needs or learning disorders. And it's especially beneficial for learners who must be constantly motivated to engage in appropriate academic and social behaviors. Now a bit about using behavioral techniques in designing and implementing instruction. We may have talked a little bit about behavioral objectives in this class. You may get that term in other classes. But the operant approach to teaching does include a very specified target behavior. What is to be learned? That's decided in advance. And the instruction is designed, as illustrated in this graphic, to reach that target. What do you want your students to be able to do and know at the end of instruction? What are the goals, outcomes, standards, proficiencies, targets, and benchmarks? The notion of what are the objectives, under what conditions, at what level of proficiency is expected of the student, is conveyed to the student. This information is conveyed to the student. It gives them a goal to work towards. And to reach higher ordered skills, like critical thinking skills, the ability to analyze and synthesize and evaluate, those goals are usually the end result after starting with very specific low-level skills in order to build more complex skills. So let me just mention briefly some of the instructional strategies associated with this approach. And you'll see in a moment there has to be successful performance. Let's take a look at this. It can be very linear. Some instruction is given, and then there's a correct response that the learner needs to provide so that a reinforcement can be applied. This is operant theory. This is very different from Piaget, who says it's okay if the student experiences disequilibrium, and in fact, that is the only time when learning really occurs. Here we're saying the instruction needs to be so specific. It needs to be presented in small pieces of information. It needs bottom-up processing. It tends to be very teacher-directed. I'm designing this instruction, that I can provide some instruction where the learner is not going to make a mistake, is going to give the correct response. It's error-free. Very different than Piaget's idea of instruction and learning. And so you're going to see emphasis on successful performance by repetition of ideas, by breaking down complex learning into small pieces and building these small pieces into larger ones. There's some notion of bottom-up processing, easier, lower level skills building to more complex ones. And these are programmed instruction. You may have heard that term. They're self-paced. So they're designed by others, but the individual who uses them, and a lot of computer programs were first designed using exactly this model, they're self-paced. I, the learner, can go at my own speed. So computer-assisted instruction and also programmed instruction are both use this model. It can be a little more complex. It can account for the fact that sometimes people make incorrect responses, and this is what that computer program would look like, or the workbook would look like if a person made a mistake. Then they'd be given some more instruction on the topic. Test it again. Is there correct response or not? If so, go on. And if not, get some more instruction or remedial instruction. So finally, the notion here is that mastery learning can be achieved. In this kind of instructional format or environment, students must learn one lesson well before moving on to the next. There's a logical sequence of information. Students need to demonstrate mastery at each unit, and additional activities or instruction can be added on if the students need this information or need that practice. Students who need less practice can move more quickly. Students who need more practice can move at their own pace. The proponents of behavioral theory suggest that students with anxiety benefit because they know what's expected of them and there is structure to help them feel comfortable. Using reinforcers can help students experience success. And students with lower motivation benefit by potentially having something that motivates them to engage in learning. Am I a proponent of mastery learning or behavioral learning? Not necessarily, but I do think that the benefits that I just talked about are real, and you need to consider those. Behavioral techniques have been shown to work very well with students with special needs, and if you're going to be teaching in that arena, this is something you really need to consider. Okay, our 3 modules have come to an end. We've covered operant theory in a broad way. I suggest that you read, that you read the text or anything else that you can get your hands on about behavioral learning. I suggest that you view the Discovering Psychology video at the website discoveringpsychology.org. I think I've talked about this before, and there's a link somewhere or this information on the website for you. It's a 30-minute video called Learning, and it'll give you a nice background. I suggest that you can go online and look at several other videos. There are going to be some links to videos online on your class website. You might want to take a look on YouTube at operant conditioning in goldfish. That's a cute little one. And definitely the Big Bang Theory, which is that TV show, has several excerpts online that show the use of reinforcement and punishment. So take a look at one of those. There's some that are very clever. And so you can search that on YouTube, which is Big Bang Theory and reinforcement. If you have any questions, as always, you can contact me via the discussion forum. I wish you well. I wish you a good day. And as always, let's be careful and let's go out there and be kind to one another. Bye now.